Good evening all, and welcome. I hope that you've all had a very pleasant Valentine's Day. And now it's time to end this lovely night with some true tales of horror. As an added bonus, my wife has agreed to narrate half of the stories for your listening pleasure. So without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I lived in a mid-sized town in nowhere, Texas. It's no Houston, but almost 150,000 people lived here, so it wasn't a super small town either. Now, we were a military town, as in there is a large military base pretty much attached to the city, and a lot of moving around goes on in my town. On average, people who move here either stay here for life or move away in 2 to 4 years. Me and my family moved here when I was in the 8th grade. Since the town is so small, there are only about a dozen elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and only 2 high schools. So chances are you usually pretty much know everyone your age by the time you get to high school. When I moved, I enrolled in the closest middle school, but it was December, so I moved in the middle of the school year, and so everyone had already made their groups of friends. I was also the only kid in my grade that was of Middle Eastern descent, not to mention I was coming down from a northern state of Texas, and due to past bullying, and not to mention I was coming down from a northern state to Texas, and due to past bullying, I had, and still have, huge social anxiety and awkwardness. I didn't make any friends for a long time. I still remember listening to Eminem on my iPod and eating lunch alone for the first 8th grade, and eating lunch alone for much of the grade, until I made not only the first friend in town, but my first female friend ever. Her name was Maria, and she had lived in this town her whole life. She was of Mexican descent, and we had a similar upbringing, so we got along great. Thanks to her, I found a friend group of my own, in her friends, and she would be kind enough to tell me the details on people around school, like she was telling me who were the good kids, the bad kids, the smart kids, and the like. By the time junior year of high school rolls around, I'm fairly popular, and me and Maria are still friends. She had her own circle, and I had my own, but we still hung out every now and then. Plus, we had a bunch of classes together. One of these classes was competitive choir, so we had class plus after-school training for the choir club. At first, we used to sit wherever we wanted, but we were later arranged by vocal range, or whatever it's called. She was an alto, and I was a bass. If you're into music, you probably know what I'm talking about here. Now, I sat next to a friend of mine, Dave, and the new kid, Zach. I remembered my time alone, and how brutal this town could be, so me and Dave befriended Zach, and soon they were in my group of friends in choir, and Maria now had some other girls, and her friends. Zach was a bit weird. A good-looking kid, but he had a lisp and was shy and barely spoke. When he did speak, it was nothing unusual that I remember. He was a pretty normal guy, except for one conversation where he got really graphic and told us about his fetishes, and this stuff was way too kinky, at least for me at the time, so we just laughed it off. He was also super religious and heavily involved with his church group, and would often text me Bible verses before going to bed. One day, when I had extra time in choir, my friend Dave told me that he had a crush on Maria, and that if I didn't mind I should introduce the two. And they hit it off, and were hanging out and going out together, but not together yet. Ah, high school. Anyway, we had a state competition, so we would get to skip the whole school day and go compete, and then our instructor would let us out at the mall and would take us back to school only when it was time to go home. Maria was getting frustrated that Dave hadn't made his move, which I promised he would since we talked about it. So somehow this turns into a group thing, and at the mall the two of my friends would meet up with Maria and her two friends at the mall for lunch and to hang out after. So me and the boys get talking about which of the girls we're interested in. Dave was with Maria, obviously. Plus, she's a homie, so she was never an option for me. So it was between the other two girls. Zach was awkward and shy, so the choice was up to me. Luckily, I have Maria in my corner, so I asked her about her friends. One was a blonde girl named Alyssa, and the other was a redhead named Samantha. So Maria knows me pretty well, and she tells me that Samantha is into anime and heavy metal. She was also the biggest gamer, but she liked to keep that all on the down low. All stuff I was into, and she told me Alyssa was weird and she was super Christian. So I thought obviously these matches were made in heaven. Me and Maria laughed at how perfect Zach and Alyssa were together, and we exchanged stories in order to determine who was weirder. It was her. Anyway, the night goes well, and eventually we all end up dating the people we were with that night. Samantha and I dated for the rest of junior year throughout summer, and she broke up with me a few weeks into senior year. Honestly, I didn't blame her. Because of my background, I'm not allowed to date, so I had to hide our relationship. And like I said, the city was a moderately small place, so the chances of running into someone I knew, or worse, my parents, were pretty damn high. So we barely ever went out. Plus, she was really attractive and she was a gamer, so her window of opportunity was pretty big. Definitely better dudes than me. Dave and Maria got married, and now even have a kid together. We're still friends to this day. Anyway, Zach was in a lot of my senior year classes. In fact, I would say he was in 6 out of 8. So at first, he was his normal self and we were friends from last year, so I thought I knew him pretty well. But one day he stopped hanging out with me, and he appeared angrier and angrier every passing day. There would be multiple consecutive days where he would just come into class dressed in all black and wouldn't say a word, not even to the teachers. One day when he wasn't there, our English teacher told us that the staff were worried about him, and they reached out to his parents, and they didn't tell us what was going on, but that we shouldn't be mean to him and be very cautious around him. Senior year was about 2 months from being over, when the craziest story starts spreading through the school. Alicia was hospitalized after they found cuts and bruises on her, and she told the authorities that it was Zach. And when we had seen him talking to the police at school the next morning, indeed, his fists were bandaged up, and some people said they saw him crying and confessing. Zach didn't graduate with us. He was moved to some other facility after a few days, and I never saw him again. But my hatred for him had just formed. Fast forward, I went to college in the same town, and nearly all of the kids that decided to continue on to college stayed in the town and went to the same local state university. I dormed for my first semester, but after my awful experience with my drug-addicted first roommate, I moved back with my parents, but due to differences in morals, we drifted apart, and they moved away to another state. My group of friends in college was different from when I was in high school. In fact, only a few of them were from this town, and one of them was Alyssa. Now, she had a real change during the past few years. Understandably, she was in a rebellious phase, so she abandoned Christianity, cut ties with her family, and moved to Montana. She got heavy into drugs. Thanks to my one and only roommate, I was familiar with a lot of drugs, and I myself had become a constant toker. She told us about her family, drugs, and religious issues. She would interrupt conversations to bring up this kind of stuff quite often. It was really weird, and we were all kind of annoyed by her, But because we all knew what she'd gone through, we were nice to her. Besides, Zach was back in town, and we'd all seen him around somewhere. Again, small town, so a visit to Walmart without running into someone you know is unlikely. All the stuff Alyssa randomly brought up were the stuff I can relate to. So one day, I tell her about my own experience with a toxic family. And at this point, I was ex-Muslim, and I also was bouncing around friends' couches, so we had a bit of ground to relate on, and we end up having a nice conversation. Next day I wake up, and she left me a few missed calls at obscure hours, and vague "hi" texts. I didn't respond. I just leave for class. During class, I look out the door window, and I can see her walking outside. But I didn't really care, nor see anything weird about that at the time. I've seen myself, so I was pretty confident no one would ever follow me because of my looks, and I wasn't rich or anything, so nothing ever crossed my mind. When I left the room, I said hey, and expected us to go our separate ways. But she started walking with me, and she was upset about how I didn't even respond to her. I was taken aback, because, well, people don't usually do this kind of thing, but I apologized and she forgave me. All of a sudden, she starts talking to me about how a number of different things, all within the span of a minute. And then, she started acting like we had been friends for so long. Now, she did go to high school with me, but almost no interaction ever happened. The stuff she was saying was made-up stories about how we used to hang out in high school, and how she would replace her friends with me in a story, or would replace Maria in a story. Maria had told her about me and her. It was all weird stuff. She followed me all the way to my car, and even convinced me to get some coffee with her. Again, knowing what Zach had done to her. I excused myself, and went to my friend's house to crash. I ended up showing up pretty late to my buddy's apartment, and he's throwing a party. The usual college stuff. Beer pong, music, talking, dancing, shots and whatnot. So when I show up, I appear on someone's Snapchat story, and she sees it and starts blowing up my phone. I explained to her that I wasn't lying, and that I'm really tired, but he threw a party, and had no obligation to inform me. I am just crashing after all. To make her feel better, I ended up inviting her and spending the entirety of the night with her. We got pretty drunk, and we ended up leaving for her place to spend the rest of the night. I was pretty drunk, but I remember we showed up. I asked her to charge my phone, and just passed out on her bed in her one-bedroom apartment. When I woke up, I'm fully clothed, and I can tell pretty obviously that my little friend down below has not seen some action that night. But Alicia was pretty much naked except for her lower garments. She insists that we had, and that we had to be in a relationship now. I tell her that I don't have feelings for her like that, and she begins to cry, and I consolidate her. But when her tears mix with the option of getting in to move in with her, I selfishly agree, because I was tired of jumping couches. Plus, I know she's a good person who's just gone through some bad stuff, right? I tell her I needed to get to class, and that I'll pick up my stuff from my friend's house, and would meet her back in her apartment later that day. All of a sudden, I get a text from Maria. We probably hadn't spoken in a year or so, and she had seen on Facebook that I was now in a relationship with Alicia, which suspiciously was posted at 4 AM. Now, I don't know how Facebook works, but I'm pretty sure that both parties have to agree to post the new relationship. What's weirder is that it was done from my account, so the post was mine, meaning she probably used the fingerprint lock on the phone when I was sleeping, sent herself the request, and then accepted it from her device, which was possible since I gave her my phone to charge, since the charger was on her side of the bed. Or maybe she had seen my password at some point. I doubt I wouldn't have woken up. Maria tells me that Alicia is crazy, and that she wants to meet up to talk about it. So I show up to Maria and Dave's place, and Zach was there. Apparently, he had gotten back in touch with Dave after graduation, and they were all living together for now. Zach tells me that she has bipolar disorder, and he starts listing off a number of crazy things she had done to him. The craziest of which were, she killed his dog with her car when he tried to break up, and then accused his mum of pushing the dog into the car. She would occasionally wake Zach up in the middle of the night with a knife to his throat and would threaten to slit it if he didn't admit to whatever she was accusing him of. She beat up his 15-year-old sister. She told lies about him to his parents. She told teachers at school that he was bullying her into staying with him, but didn't want the teachers doing anything about it. Later, she got even crazier and told Zach he couldn't talk to other girls, and that if he did, she would kill him. She told him she knew where he lived, and where his mum worked, and where his other dogs were, so he should listen to her. She would only do this privately, obviously, and wasn't always like that, and he told me she was pretty normal for the most part, but during her bouts of craziness, they'd last longer and longer every time they happened. The craziest story he told me was that when he was seriously trying to break it off with her, she threatened to kill herself if he didn't stop talking to suspicious people. And to her, that included everyone, including me. When I asked him about the night he beat her up, he tells me that he was attempting to break up with her, and he had gotten further than he had ever gone before, and he thought he'd finally done it, after an hour or so of arguing. But then she showed back up at his place and outside on his lawn, and put a knife to her own throat, and said she would do it if Zach didn't punch his dad's truck. An odd request, and Zach didn't do it. But when he saw that she was pressing down on the knife, he punched the car with a little bit of force, basically tapped it, but this drove her insane, and she started cutting herself in a few places, screaming for him to punch, and then put the knife back in her throat and poked a little hole that drew some blood, which was enough for Zach to panic and punch the truck, fracturing his hand. He said that as soon as that happened, without even saying a word, she left. Zach's parents took care of the hand and weren't at their house when the police arrived, but at a relative's, and Zach was still newish, so nobody told him about Alicia accusing him of assault. In fact, he nor his parents knew, since they spent the night at their relative's house. He didn't know until he was talking to the cops the next morning at school. Also, Zach's parents were informed as soon as they got to work, because the cops showed up looking for them. Eventually, Alicia's parents and Zach and his parents had a meeting at school. Zach told me that Alicia's parents had promised to keep her away from him, and told them that they would move right after high school and take her with them to Montana if Zach and his parents didn't press any charges. The police believed Zach, because the doctors knew immediately that the bruises and cuts were self-inflicted. Plus, she already had a known and registered mental condition, so the authorities chose to believe Zach and his parents, fearing he would get bullied at school because of the incident, and decided to put him in an accelerated program so that he could graduate before us and choose not to walk the stage, while Alicia had actually gone to a mental health facility to avoid any more police involvement, but her parents pulled her out immediately after. Anyway, he gives me her parents' number and tells me I should probably give them a call right away. But I decided that I would let her down gently but firmly tonight, and if she got too crazy I would call her parents. Because the story could be made up, and I'm still a bit suspicious of Zach at this point. But when I opened my phone, multiple of my friends had texted me, telling me that some girl was showing up and demanding to see me, saying that she was my girlfriend and threatening them. I decided that I would call them now, while I was with Zach, who I believed now. I reached her mum, who I had a conversation with, but she basically tells me the story of how they found out she had bipolar, which was pretty crazy in itself. She confirms Zach's story and she tells us that Alyssa's older than 18, so they have no power over her, plus they can't do anything thousands of miles away. When I ask if she could talk to Alyssa for me, she flat out refuses and says, "Trust me, it's better if I don't get involved, especially for you." So clearly she wasn't any help, and I'm pretty sure she hasn't done anything illegal yet, besides yell threats, so I don't think the cops would have interfered either. Eventually Zach advises me, since there's nothing she really has on me, I'm not close with my family, nor do they live nearby, and that she doesn't know where I am now, nor will she know, because I am actually homeless, in a sense that blocking her and ignoring her would be a best option. If I were to have any interactions with her, they had to be in public, which was fine, since my school was the only place she knew I'd be. Mario mentions that Alicia didn't have good enough GPA in high school to attend the school I'm attending, and with some investigation from all the friends she and I were around, none of us had her in any class. After that, I told campus security about her and shared my experiences with them, and they told me that she indeed was not a student and that they would look out for her. Me and Zach, the guy I thought was the antagonist, ended up becoming roommates for 2 years, and we even moved to a different state together. I heard she was arrested at some dude's house because she pulled a knife on the guy, and her parents had to bail her out and took her back to Montana. Alicia, let's never meet again, and I hope you get the help you so desperately need.
I'm a lesbian. I'm one of those girls who you would never guess is gay. I'm what they call in the gay community a femme. A gay woman who is very feminine, no short hair, etc. You get the drift. In 2016, I had a rather unpleasant breakup with my first love, whom I was with on and off for 3 years. She was actually the first woman I've ever been with, so you can imagine being so young and naive, this experience wasn't the best. Several months had passed of crying and being a general depression mess, until my loneliness and eager to love again brought me to Plenty of Fish, the dating app. I joined and I had the occasional messages from strangers such as, "Oh my god, as if you're gay," or a man would slide in my messages with general perverted messages. I was thinking of deleting it just after I'd only been on it for 2 weeks. I received a message from, let's call her Alice, one evening. Now she looked beautiful, long black hair, blue eyes, tall, and had what seemed a cracking personality which instantly caught my eye. We spoke for 3 weeks via WhatsApp, and then leading on to phone calls, etc. The usual exciting stuff which eventually leads up to a meetup, which we decided to do. I met her on an evening outside one of my city's gay bars. I walked out of the taxi to be greeted by 2 unknown people. I remember thinking, what the hell? A ginger-haired boy and a tiny woman with glasses. Now she must have only been around literally 4'8". Being stunned to meet them, I say, "Hey," and we all sat down. Now Alice was inside and I could see her, and she looked rather different from her half figure I could see. She slowly came out and she looked almost a different person. She had short brown hair, brown eyes, and was very top heavy. Not exactly the best date when you feel you've been catfished. However, I didn't want to be rude, as I'm a bit of a people pleaser that way. I stayed and we spoke. Now she told me she had a hair disorder where it fell out, and she literally shown me bald patches, so she admitted she wore wigs, and that's what she wore in her pictures. As for her eyes, she put on, daily, blue eye contacts. I must admit, this kind of made me think literally, what the hell? Don't ask me why, but I ended up going back with her and those 2 friends, and we got drunk, and I ended up sleeping with her. I know, stupid, right? The next day, hungover, I peeled myself out ready for my train back to my city, and I was bombarded with text messages saying, "I had a great time," and "When can I see you again?" But then it proceeded to, "So, when will you be my girlfriend?" Bearing in mind these texts were sent almost one after the other. I kind of didn't want to be mean, so I said I'll meet again maybe when I'm free, and dragged my hangover ass on the train home. The next day, she wanted to meet me again. So I said, okay, being bored and again not wanting to be mean. I guess looking back now, I just like the idea of that someone liked me again. Now let me tell you, this woman, for the next 2 years of dating, brought hell into my life. Violence, cheating, and almost to the point of me being killed. Yes, quite a story turn. So we dated. Don't ask me why. I honestly just rushed into something because I mentioned I liked the intention she gave. She seemed okay for the first 2 months and so, and then the hell really began. She was taking drugs now. These drugs aren't the type like weed, let's put it that way. She would disappear and be gone for 3 days, sometimes with friends taking drugs, which led her to lying and me finding out through her friends' Snapchat stories. When I had had enough, I went to her mum's house and spoke to her calmly about how maybe it was time it ended. I didn't love her, and to be honest, she was lying, taking drugs, and I also caught text messages on her phone from other women, so yep, I was kind of done. Once I told her my true feelings, she threw me on the bed, held me down and strangled me until I literally turned blue. Now, I'm only a small being, 5'5" at the time, and her being 5'11", you can kind of imagine my frame matched against her much bigger one. After she choked me to the point of complete panic, she ran and grabbed a box of paracetamols and swallowed each tablet in front of me until the whole box was gone. And with her dark eyes gazing into mine, she whispered, "This is your fault." I panicked and made her throw up the pills and cried about how I was sorry. To be honest with you, I was terrified of her. After this event, I stayed due to the fear of her killing herself and her choking me out or worse. Not even a month after, whilst I was staying at her mum's, she locked me inside her house after a dispute. I ran to grab the telephone and she threw it so hard against the wall it literally shattered into pieces. I, being already an anxious person, had a full-blown breakdown and cried. She came up to me with a friggin' knife, held it to my stomach, and I shit you not, her eyes were demonic black, the kind of dead eyes you see in these serial killers. I honestly thought she was going to kill me, and just like a light being switched off, she completely changed to being nice and held me, asking why I was crying. Really? I knew this girl was nuts. I knew I had to leave or else she would one day surely kill me. So a few months passed of her occasionally hitting me, slapping me, but I just needed to find a way out. So a miracle happened where a girl she was cheating with contacted me with some abuse such as "Alice hates you and she's mine now" via text. I pretended to be angry and used this as my escape. I finally had a reason to leave, so I left. Once home, I blocked her number, blocked her Facebook, and I actually felt an absolute peace come over me. I got a new job a month later and things actually started looking up. New friends, fresh environment, etc. Until one day, into the first month of my work, who did I receive an email of? Only Alice. Stating she had stolen my house key and she was going to come into my house when I was asleep and burn me and my family alive. Trust me on this one, she would have. Me totally forgetting I couldn't find my house key for months, so that totally made sense. She actually did take it. Now I was in full panic mode. I cried in front of my new teammates and they finally got it out of me on what the emails were actually about. Going home and explaining to my mum what actually occurred that day, we spoke of going to the police and showing the emails as evidence. On that night, adding insult to injury, my friend had messaged me and told me Alice had put my private photos, and I mean nudes, all over her Snapchat and practically shown everyone who knew me. Let's just say that once the police got involved, she crapped her pants like the bully that she is and officially, finally left me alone. It's been 3 years since Alice, and after the breakup I was broken, confused, spent most of my days indulging in alcohol. Please, people, please, if I can help any of you, don't ever let loneliness or the sorrow for someone who wears a mask overtake your morals. This is a story which almost broke me, so always make sure that if you do get a bad vibe or if they strike you once, please make sure that you leave and that you do not do what I have done.
At the time this occurred, I was 16. The girl mentioned was 21 going on 22. I met her working at my first job. It was a seasonal one, thankfully. During my first 2 weeks there, she would stare at me and follow me around the rooms. I would go to the bathroom, and she'd knock on the door or text me and say she'd missed me. We exchanged numbers for business purposes, and I found this strange, but I knew that she had a minor mental disability, so I didn't want to be mean and just brushed it off. After about a month into the job, she asks me to hang out at the nearby park after work. I agreed, because I was going to be going somewhere next door to there, and not only was I afraid of saying no and then promptly running into her, but I also didn't see her as any sort of threat. So we met in the park. I was wise enough to have a friend join me though, who stayed nearby in case I needed someone, and just get to talking. She starts telling me how beautiful I am and tries to hold my hand. Weirded out, I pulled my hand away and thanked her for the compliment without saying much else. She had gotten a new Jeep that she was really proud of, as she had been saving for it for 2 years, so she asked if I wanted to see it. I said sure, and followed her to the parking lot. Keep in mind that it was daytime, and there were people everywhere, and I was in immediate contact with my friend, so I wasn't afraid. This was in the heat of summer, and it was around 95 Fahrenheit outside. So when she asked if I wanted to sit in the aircon, I went to hop in the front, but she headed to the back. I slowly followed and kept my hands on the handle, which I made sure was unlocked the whole time. At first she sat with her legs across from me and talked normally, but slowly kept moving closer. Then she laid her head in my lap, very suddenly, and I didn't know how to react. I didn't touch her. I just sat there in shock and started talking about random work-related topics. She said she didn't want to talk about work and instead wanted to talk about us. She told me that she really liked me and started showing me random pictures of lesbian couple goals off Pinterest and telling me how she wanted that to be us. I said that I should leave and went to open the door when she tried to forcefully kiss me. I moved my face away and she missed, so I got out of the car and said that I needed to leave and ran inside the store with my friend and was freaking out. It doesn't end there. Not only does this girl follow me into the store, but is referring to me as baby and smiling like nothing uncomfortable had happened. I told her that me and my friend needed to leave, and we rushed out. All the while she yelled at me to see her again soon all the way up to the car. For the rest of the job, which was the rest of summer, she would text me almost daily that she was in love with me and wanted me. She gave me notes at work, putting them in my purse and jacket, and started telling our co-workers that we were dating when we absolutely weren't. As soon as the job ended, I blocked her number, only for her to get a new one and text me from there. Blocked again. Then she proceeded to get those weird emails to text services online and started texting me from there. I blocked every account she made. She added me on social media through contacts, and I blocked all of the accounts she made, but she kept on making more. I then found out through another co-worker that she had a boyfriend of 3 years and was trying to cheat on him with me. I confronted her about this and told her to leave me alone. For more than 2 years after this, she would text me every few weeks to every few months from a new account to try and win me over. Then I ran into her at my new job, and she started showing up at every event that my new job hosted and would not leave me alone during them, following me everywhere, begging for me to call her. All the while my bosses watched in confusion and I had to explain myself. I eventually quit that job, and I haven't seen her since. She's tried talking to me, but stopped last year when I got into a new relationship with my current boyfriend. I'm sure, though, that this probably isn't the last I'm going to hear from her.
So I had just gotten out of a pretty significant relationship with someone of 4 years. Nearly engaged and moving in together, etc., when things fell apart. I took a good amount of time to be on my own and get my crap together again when my friends began encouraging me to get back out there. Needless to say, I really wasn't wanting anything at that point, nor looking for anything. But they insisted that I at least just go out on a few casual dates, for practice. Just to kind of get my skills back up for when I was ready. I think they were honestly just worried because I had become a bit of a hermit. So I matched with this girl, who's home from college for the summer. She's a little out of the way from me, but was eager to meet. Seemed really interested. Was even willing to come to my area, etc. I really wasn't all that interested, to be truthful, but my friends again encouraged this. Practice, whatever that means. A date doesn't mean commitment, whatever. I want to be very clear though, that I was extremely honest and explicit with her that I was not looking for anything serious, or anything at all. I was very forthcoming that I had gotten out of something serious and I was kind of encouraged to explore. She persisted and still wanted to meet, so we agreed to a casual lunch in a sports bar that week. I get there, and she was already waiting for me. I was a bit put off by how much different she looked than her pictures. Not trying to sound shallow or anything, but her pictures from Tinder easily had to be at least 5 years old, which I verified based on tattoos she had in person versus ones she didn't have in the pictures. So I was a bit thrown off by that. I wasn't the least bit attracted to her, but I was there just to have a new experience anyway, right? No big deal. I felt so bad because the entire time she seemed so incredibly shy and awkward. I even noticed her hand shaking when she reached for her glass, which I found endearing, honestly. So I did my best to get her talking to try and help her feel more relaxed. I asked her questions and chatted about things I figured you'd chat about on dates. Where she grew up, music she's into, school she goes to, major, etc. All to which I literally received one-word answers. It went on like this for about an hour, and she was just not working with me at all. But I tried to keep room in my heart, because it was clear she was feeling anxious, and I understand that from a personal level. So as we finished lunch, and I'm receiving one-word answers, I kind of become a bit suggestive that we should conclude our date by saying I had to get back to feed my animals and do some laundry, etc. But she became very adamant on spending more time and asked if we could do something else. I was genuinely trying to be a decent person, so I agreed, and we found a nearby park to walk. This is where things get weird. We sat on a park bench. Mind you, it's broad daylight. There are kids playing basketball nearby, folks jogging past. I start trying to make conversation yet again, but still get the one-word answers. Then out of seemingly nowhere, without any warning whatsoever, she proceeds to just kiss me really aggressively, tongue and everything. I was honestly just so shocked I stood there frozen, not knowing what the F to do. I had this timid, shy woman who's really not made much conversation with me at all, who was so nervous she's visibly shaking, just turned into a freaking bear, mauling my face in like 6 seconds. My head was spinning with confusion and anxiety. I swear it felt like it lasted forever and I just prayed for it to stop. I was so put off and honestly a bit afraid to do or say anything. Like, what do you even do in that situation? I was just hoping she'd pick up on my very obvious body language that I wasn't reciprocating anything at all. I was completely unprepared for a situation like this. Then some really nasty guy walks by, gawking and catcalling, and literally begins propositioning us into a three-way. I'm just like, what the actual F is going on? I need to get out of here. I was 1,000 different types of uncomfortable. I end up managing to ward him off after telling him politely no. More than several times. All the while she's just laughing and I'm thinking, who even are you? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde over here? What the F? So he leaves and I'm insisting now that I need to leave and go home. She seems to ignore what I'm saying and gets very close to my face again and says, did you like that? Did you think I'm sexy? Do you want me? When I tell you I was so effing nervous, I was like, I really need to get home. And she was like, can I come? And I told her very firmly, no. She literally tried to persuade me to let her come back to my place with me, and I had to say no more than 3 times. So finally, I'm home and frankly just kind of shaken up. I hadn't really done the dating thing in quite a long time, but that felt very abnormal. She then texts me after she gets home and asks me on a second date. And I was very kind, despite being made incredibly uncomfortable, and I told her I thought she was a very cool chick and that I had a nice time. Lie. But that I did not feel there was anything there and reminded her I wasn't looking for anything. She then text bombarded me a bunch of crazy things, saying how she didn't understand and was so confused that she thought I was so into her and that things went great. I did not respond to any of these because now she's continuing to cross my boundaries. I said what I needed to say and I thought I was being decent by at least being honest. So the text continued and I figure they're going to eventually stop. It was a first date. How can someone be so upset over someone not reciprocating on a first date? They did not stop. By the text, you would have thought we had ended a 2-year relationship. And she began calling, at which point I had to block her number. So, nightmare Tinder girl, please, for the love of everything, let's never, ever meet again. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. We hope that you've enjoyed this video, and we also hope that you've had or are having a wonderful Valentine's Day. We hope that you don't encounter any situations like the ones that we've just told. Also, I wanted to give a thank you to all of you who wished me well and my daughter as well when we were ill. It meant so much to us that you are so supportive and loving, and it's just amazing that we have this wonderful community. So thank you. Also, if you're new here and you like the content that Mort creates, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment below as well on what you thought on our video. We'd love to know. But for now, stay awesome, and Mort will see you in the next one.